Hey everyone, welcome back. So it's been a few weeks since I've done a garden tour. I was actually away for about 2.5 weeks and I haven't done a garden tour since I've been back. So I thought I would do another video today to show you what we're up to. So in this bed we have the sunflowers, which like I said are the biggest sunflowers that I've ever grown. And they're not even done growing yet. I feel like they grow like a foot every day. It's been pretty wild actually. We also have chamomile, which you can see right there. We've had so many strawberries, I'm going to pick those today. This is definitely the best strawberry bed I've ever grown. Then we have dill. We have some cilantro here. Behind this area, we have some basil, which isn't doing so well because it's getting shaded out by everything else in this bed. And then we also have asparagus, which is right here, if you can see, which also isn't doing the best because it is being shaded out. Previous gardens, I've always found that I kind of plant lightly. I'll do rows of plants and then I'll have a lot of empty space at the end of the year. And I think I just give my plants too much space to grow, which of course is a good thing in some circumstances, but I think that I haven't been optimizing the amount of food that I can grow in a single space. So this year my goal was to jam pack these beds, so both this one and the Brassica bed and the whole garden in general, with as many plants as I physically could. And I think the results have been pretty good. So obviously the sunflowers are doing great, the chamomile is doing amazing. I've had more strawberries in this bed than I've had in all my previous years growing strawberries combined, so that's pretty amazing. But some things are definitely struggling, so the things in the middle like the basil, which are being overshadowed by the sunflowers, by the strawberries, they're a little bit smaller. They haven't gotten as bushy as they normally would. So I think that next year I would do the same thing, but maybe not put so many sunflowers in the bed, or kind of make sure that everything is still able to get enough sunlight so that it can actually grow. But overall, I'm really happy with the results. So I'm gonna harvest some of this chamomile using this thing. This is what we use to pick blueberries, but I recently saw Kevin from Epic Gardening who uses this to harvest his chamomile. So let's give it a go. So with chamomile, you want to get it when it's at like this stage where the petals are still open. They're kind of pointed downwards. I mean, let's see if I can. Oh, it is pretty easy. You don't want them when they're like that, where the top is really big. So let's see if I can get. The potato bed is looking so good. Like I said in my last video, this last row of potatoes didn't really grow. I mean, there are a handful of potatoes there, but they're not as big as the ones that are in this row or in this row. And I think it's because we had such a wet spring that that area, which was a little bit more low-lying, the seed potatoes probably just got wet and rotted out. So that's why we're not seeing any growth. And I think I mentioned this in my last video, but I do like the lazy gardener potato method. So I kind of put the seed potatoes on top of the soil. I put a little bit of soil over top, but then I just mulch everything really heavily. And as you can see, this is a good amount of mulch here. This is like, I don't know, probably 10 inches of mulch that I've now mounded up on the sides of the potatoes. And as you can see, they are in bloom right now. The general rule for potatoes is that the potatoes are ready about 2 weeks after the flowers die back. And I know that a lot of people just wait for the plants to start yellowing and dying back themselves, which is of course what you can also do. But yeah, the potato patch is looking great. I think this is my best potato patch that I've grown so far, so I'm really happy with the way that this looks. Over to this bed here. So this is my Brassica bed. And I have got to say that this is the best brassica year I've had ever. So the hoop house, this little hoop house that I put on is definitely doing its job. I've already harvested a handful of broccoli out of the beds. There's cauliflower growing. The Brussels sprouts look amazing. I actually haven't looked under here in about a week, so let's uncover it and see what we can find. Alright, so this is the Brassica Bed up close. So starting at the front here, an ant nest, which is always fun to deal with. And these are ants that bite, which isn't so fun to deal with. So here we have some Spanish flag or firecracker vines. And then this is moonflower, but it hasn't gotten very big. So then in the front here we have a bunch of lettuce, and then behind the lettuce we have Brussels sprouts, which I don't know if you'll be able to see, but there are definitely Brussels little sprouts growing there. I'll get a better photo of them on the other side, or a better shot of them on the other side. And then I guess I should show you this side as well, since it's the trellis that I have here. So we have firecracker vines growing all the way up, which look really beautiful. And then we have some moonflower here. Oh wow, I don't know if you can see that, but this is the flower here that's going to open right away. If my camera will, there we go. That's going to open soon. So moonflowers are in the morning glory family, and they have these beautiful white flowers that apparently smell amazing. And they open at night, so they're for night pollinators. So back over here, we have Brussels sprouts, and you should be able to see them in there. Yeah, so these are looking quite good. And last year I had Brussels sprouts, but they were just covered in insect poop because we had a lot of cabbage moth butterfly damage. Then in the front here, I have carrots, and I pulled them up yesterday and they are actually looking quite good. This variety here is, I think, the Carota, something along those lines. They're supposed to be really sweet, which they were. It might be too dark, but there's some cauliflower growing, which is looking pretty good. And then we have some broccoli that's starting to flower there, so I'll pick some of that today. A lot of my bok choy actually went to, or it bolted, so I just let some of it, I pulled most of it out, but I let some of it go to seed so that I can save the seeds for next year. So I'm basically just waiting for this to dry out. And then on this side, these carrots are the purple carrots, and they're quite densely grown together. So I'm going to see if I can pull one out so I can show you what they look like. Can you see? I don't know if it'll, there we go. Kind of there. So it's a nice purple variety. This one is pretty long already, which is pretty impressive. And yeah, the same thing with this bed. I tried to pack it as densely as I could, and I've had pretty good success. I want to try cutting some of these old broccoli out, the ones that I've already harvested from. And then at the ends, there's some more lettuce there. So one thing that did not grow very well in this bed is my beets. So there are beets here. There we go. So if I pull this, oh, I just pulled out a bunch. These are my beets. If you can see those. Yeah, so as you can tell, they're not doing very well because I'm assuming it's because they're not getting any sunlight, because they are so overshadowed by all of the brassicas in here. So next time I'll just do beets somewhere else, or maybe along the edges like the carrots, because the carrots seem to be doing really good. So that's a lesson for next year. So one of the things that I struggle with the most in my garden is quackgrass. And so this year I decided to continue the my no-till journey, which I'm kind of regretting a little bit. I wish I would have tilled in the spring instead of doing what I did. So essentially I had a bunch of grass growing in the garden in the spring. So I cut it really short, and then I just heavily mulched with straw. And you can kind of still see some of the straw in the beds right now, but the grass grew through really quickly. And at this point, because my plants are pretty established at this point, I can't actually pull up the grass because the roots of the grass and the roots of my plants are so intertwined. If I pulled up the grass, I'd also pull out my plants, which I don't want. So when I came back from my work trip, I had about 1.5 feet of grass everywhere in the garden. And some of my plants were obviously struggling with it because they themselves were only like 1 foot tall. So what I did, which I mean I don't recommend, but desperate times call for desperate measures, is I took some scissors and I literally went around the entire garden and cut the grass with scissors, just to make sure that my plants that were lower than the grass could still get sun and then hopefully grow big enough to get above the grass, and then they could do well on their own. So what you're seeing now is the result of that. So some things are bigger. You still see a lot of grass in the garden at this point, but like I said, there's nothing I can really do. I've heavily mulched multiple times and quackgrass just grows right through it. So next year I think I'm going to build some additional raised beds because the quackgrass is just too difficult for me to deal with, unfortunately. Okay, we'll start at this end of the garden. This is one of 3 corn patches, and this one's definitely doing the best. So the corn is about, I'd say 2.5 feet tall. It's looking great. And I recently saw a video by someone who, with their corn, I'm trying to see if I can find an example here. So with this one, for example, so these will grow into their own, ears of corn. So I saw someone like rip these off or cut them off, and they said that it'll help the plant focus on the one ear of corn for like the main stalk. So I think I might try that with a couple. I've had some good years of corn and some not great years of corn, so I figured I would give it a go, see what happens. So what I'm essentially doing is just cutting off these little side shoots of corn that are growing on the side of the plant here. So I'm just taking scissors but I don't know if this is going to work, so maybe don't take my advice yet until I show you the results in the fall. So as you can also see, the grass is growing pretty long. I'm trying to get it before it goes to seed, but it's not always possible. This is some edamame that does not seem to want to grow up anything, but I don't know if you can see, there's a little edamame pod there. So I mean, it's producing, it's doing well, even if it's crowded by all the grass here. And the sweet peas as well are they're doing okay. I think next year I need like a trellis that has more things for them to grip on. I don't know if the spacing, I don't know if you can see, but the spacing is probably like 1/2 foot in between each of the areas of string, or the string. So I think that next year I'm gonna have to add something so that there's more, so that these tiny little tendrils have something to grow on. So this is an example of a plant where I really tried to cut the grass around it because it was getting overshadowed by the grass. So this is a melon, and you can see here that it is, oh my god, look at that. Oh, that makes me so happy. I don't know what it is, but growing melons is like the most rewarding thing in the entire world. But yeah, so I've been trying to cut the grass around these, which is also difficult because especially with things like melons that like vine and trail, it's hard to make sure that I'm only cutting the grass. But yeah, I just kind of want to make sure that this plant is still getting sun that it needs to grow. And then over here, we have some black-eyed Susans that are still haven't bloomed yet. And then we've gotten so much mushrooms, so many mushrooms in the garden this year because of all the rain that we've had. I was doing some reading last night about artichokes. Ow. They are pokey, just to let you guys know. This one's obviously growing, but it hasn't grown terribly large, and I was wondering if it's because it needs something. I still don't see like any sign of a flower in the middle. I know that these take a long time to grow. I think they're like 85 to 100 days. So they might just need a little bit more time, and we still have like half the summer to go. So we will see. This here is my other patch of corn, which as you can see is not doing nearly as well as the one at the front, and that's because this front patch here had very little grass to begin with. Like even before I mulched the area, there was very little grass, and this area did have a lot of grass and it was kind of hard to cut around. But yeah, so I basically been going around and then taking handfuls of grass like this and then cutting them just to get it at ground level, just to give the plants a chance, a fighting chance. But as you can see, it hasn't worked terribly well in this patch. And then the cosmos, just look how beautiful that is. There's something about cosmos that just make me so happy. And then here once again is another little melon patch, and we have some melons there. So I'll probably go through later today, or maybe not today because it's going to be 33 degrees Celsius, so way too warm for me to work in the garden. But I'm going to go through and cut some more grass so that these have a little bit of a better chance to grow. More cosmos. Look at how pretty these are. Like, they just add such a nice little addition to the garden. And then there's another trellis with some sweet peas. There's a lot of volunteer tomatoes in this area. There's like one there, one there, one there, one there. That might be 2 or 3. And then there's another one down here too. So lots of volunteer tomatoes. Oh, here's another one. And then the sweet peas just growing everywhere, which, you know, it might actually look pretty cool. And as always, never fails, the zucchini are doing amazing. Like, look how big this is. This is 3 plants. These leaves are massive. The plants have so many zucchini on them. I don't think any of them are ready yet, but I would not be surprised if there's like a giant one at the bottom somewhere, because it's just so hard to see underneath all of these. I also watched a video the other day of someone pruning their zucchini, and I'm debating doing it, but I just don't know if I should, but we'll see. And then one of my favorite things that I have grown this year is this eucalyptus. I know I said it before, but I've been trying to grow eucalyptus for years, and this is the first time I've actually had plants, and they just look so good. The one thing is that they're being overshadowed by the zucchini and then by the squash on this trellis here. So I know they're not probably thriving, but they're doing really well, and man, they smell so good. Let's just get a close-up of this trellis. Things are growing up. So on this side, we have a birdhouse gourd, and then this one is also a birdhouse gourd. Then we have a Kajari melon, and there's also a loofah squash on the other side that's not doing the greatest. But then some of the squash behind the trellis are also growing up the trellis and on the other side. So this might have like 4 or 5 different squash growing on it by the end of the season. I don't know if they're all going to do well on the trellis, but we'll see. There's seriously nothing cuter than a little birdhouse gourd ovary. Like, look at how cute that is. And the plants are just so soft. It's pretty crazy. But overall, this is looking pretty good. I don't see any melons yet. Just trying to make sure that this all climbs up. So when I have a trellis with things that I'm trying to grow up it, I just try to go in and kind of tuck all of the ends of the plant back into the trellis. So I kind of weave them in to make sure that they're actually climbing and they don't end up just like flopping over or growing somewhere else. So what I do is I'll take something like this and I'll just push it back through. And then this one's already tied up, so that one should be fine. But then there's like this one. I'll just put it back through this way. And then this one, I'm going to weave behind and under so that it's just kind of forced to continue to grow up the trellis. And then this one, we'll do the same thing. Just push it back here. And then on this side, I'll do the same thing here. So I'll just kind of push it through like this. And if you want, if you have plants that have long tendrils, you could even give it a little tie like that, and that really secure it on here so that it'll really continue. And I can do the same thing with this one. That one doesn't want to grow, but it is already holding on there, so it should be fine. This one I'll just tuck in that way. The nice thing about squash is you can normally just kind of guide them to wherever you want them. So if it's, whether it's trailing on the ground or trailing up, just kind of put them where you want them to go and they'll usually stay. So here's the little loofah that I mentioned earlier. This one's not looking the best. It is growing up, but I don't know, they always seem stunted for me for some reason. I don't know if it's because they don't like being transplanted and their transplant shock is just really long, but I mean, it's looking better than loofahs I've grown in the past, so maybe it'll still produce something, but it's very small, no flowers, so I'm not super hopeful. This here is my garlic patch. I've already harvested, I'm just gonna cut some of these seed heads before they go. I've already harvested a bunch of scapes from this patch already, but there's still a handful here that need to be harvested. So basically, you're looking for these little squigglies. You can just cut them off, and then you can use them like you would use garlic. So we actually just made a pesto out of these recently, which was amazing. So it was garlic scapes, basil, sunflower seeds, olive oil, and Parmesan cheese. It was so good. And then I know some people pickle these, which are also really amazing. And then you can just chop them up and put them into any meals that you would use garlic. So my pepper patch was one of the areas that was really struggling with the grass. So I tried to cut it back as much as possible, and oh no, I didn't mean to do that, but here's the jalapeno. Oops. So I think these are the early variety. And then there's another one on this side too. It's pretty big. So yeah, I cut the grass back and they've already like doubled in size, I would say. So I'm gonna cut the grass back again, and hopefully these will continue. One of the issues that I had with the grass being so long was that the slugs could easily get to the top of the peppers, and they ate, like, you can see that there's a lot of damage on my peppers here because of the slugs and probably the grasshoppers as well. So I think cutting the grass back has definitely helped. On this one we have some shishitos, and then there's just a tiny one. This one has a hole in it, so I'm just gonna pluck that off so it doesn't waste any more energy on it. And then the tomatoes behind on this trellis are looking great. I'll go on the other side so we can get a closer look. My onion patch was another area that really struggled with the grass because the onions they were really weak and small when I put them into the garden, so they really couldn't grow past the grass. But now that I've cut it back, you can see that they're standing up tall. The bulbs are getting bigger. Oops, here you can see now the bulbs are getting bigger. So I've just kind of been pushing back the earth so that they continue to grow. But yeah, they're doing pretty good. These are an assortment of tomatoes here. So these ones are Barry's Crazy Cherry. They're looking amazing. Then these are just extras. I have no idea which ones I planted here. I just put them in because I had an extra space in the garden. And there are some peppers behind, but as you can see, the grass is definitely kind of shadowing them. So I'm gonna have to come back here and do some cutting as well. This hollyhock is looking great. Then on this trellis, I have cucuzi. The big one that you see there is a cucuzi, same on this side. And then I also have loofahs growing up. And the loofahs definitely look better on this side than they did on the other trellis. So this is the loofah here. Much bigger than the other one. Definitely looking better. And it's vining up pretty well. And then you can see that there are flowers that will bloom soon. So maybe I will actually get loofahs from this plant. This plant here was a impulse purchase, which I'm actually really excited about. We have Cucumelons. Look how cute that is. I've never tried them before. I've seen a bunch of different growers grow them. They are really prolific. Like, this plant is just absolutely taking off. It's growing over everything else. But yeah, I'm really excited to try these and see what they taste like. This area here is a little bit of a disaster. We have cosmos growing, a ton of grass. There's actually a corn patch in here as well, which you could not tell based on this shot here because they are being overgrown by grass, and I just haven't been able to cut the grass back hard enough for the corn to grow through. So I'm gonna come back here and I have a lot of cutting to do. Look at those. These are, I think, San Marzano tomatoes, and they look great. Lots of tomatoes on here. I've done a lot of pruning, so I've tried to basically cut anything that's touching the ground. I try to cut it off, so you can see that they've been pretty heavily pruned, that one especially there. And they're just slowly growing up. And then these ones at the end here, these ones had a lot of grass growing on them, so they're not nearly as tall as you can see, but ever since I cut the grass back, and they've been able to grow, so they're much larger. I still have to tie them back. They're still not tied, so I'll have to tie them to the trellis so that they can get even bigger. We have some more sunflowers growing here. Then there's some melons and squash. This is a patty pan variety here. That's doing pretty good. And then here I have my bean area and also edamame. So these are all beans. They're pulled bean variety that also have damage from grasshoppers and slugs. But so far it's actually looking pretty good. The damage was pretty extensive at the beginning, as you can see there, but it doesn't look as bad now. And then I have a little melon planted right here that has now started to grow up the trellis as well, as you can see there. I just kind of want this to go wild. And then in here, this is my mushroom patch, and I'll just lift this up so you can see. So if I continue lifting, all of that white stuff that you see in there, like right here, that's all the mycelium from the mushrooms. So it's looking good. There's lots in there. So hopefully we'll get some wine cap mushrooms in the fall. Look at that. This is I think it's called a Martini Cucumber. Yeah, it's a Martini Cucumber. So it's a white cucumber that stays white. Apparently they're great for pickling. And this plant has a bunch of other little ones that are about to go off. And then this one here, I think I actually have a cucumber on. So much grass. Yeah, so if you look here, I should probably harvest this. This is everything I've harvested from the garden today. So we have lots of chamomile, a couple carrots that I just wanted to see what they look like, so they're very tiny, 2 cucumbers, some lettuce, and a bunch of strawberries. Pretty good harvest day. Well, that's it for my garden tour today. I hope you've enjoyed following along. If you have, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you next week. I hope you have a great week in the garden.